on this, but Dan, you got to tune in Saturday morning because Saturday morning is going to be lit. It's going to be lit.
Yeah. Wait, Saturday morning?
We play the Dutch.
Okay.
The Dutch.
I'll be in Texas, so I'll probably be missing that one. But
there you go. There you go.
Yeah, it was definitely excruciating. A buddy of mine played high level striker, and so when Weah scored there and they called it offsides, I texted him like, I don't know how you play the sport because it's just like, how was that offside? I mean,
it wasn't offsides. It wasn't offsides. It was a horrible call.
It was.
It should have been game over. It should have been a 2-0, and we party the whole second half instead of like feeling like you're gonna have a heart attack for about 15 minutes.
Just somebody explain to me what is the idea behind sitting there and playing some kind of a shell defense or whatever they were doing and making absolutely no attempt to go on offense for basically the entire second half. I don't understand.
You lost your best. We lost our best player.
Guys. We're losing audience.
We have a specific cutoff time. You're right.
We got a hard out. Let's fire this thing up, guys. Josh Jacobs, juggernaut this weekend. He either went off on your bench. You're happy you drafted him. If you didn't, what did you do wrong? You know, do you have to change your approach? Do we look at dead zone, RB dead zone a little differently? We're going to dive into all of that tonight. We have two of our biggest guests returning, Glenn Lowy, high stakes, champ, beast, shark, you name it. He kills any league he's in. Adam Krautwurst, from Draft Shark comes back. We love having these guys. We've got a huge roundtable tonight, guys. Let's get right into it.
Go district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? Welcome back to the district. If you're back with us, you know we're coming off of a huge, actually Theo coming off of a huge OG Live Wire today. Go check it out. Your Week 13 waiver wire show, really the only one you're going to need. And last week, Theo, we had a huge show with Scott Connor. A lot of people calling this one of the best shows that we've put out so far, or one of the best Dynasty shows that they've seen. Our Dynasty Trade Deadline yearly special with Scott Connor was huge. So guys, go check that out. One of our most watched shows, 120 with one of the best in the game. All that on the channel, guys. If you're new, smash the subscribe, join us, join the community. We have two monster guests tonight. We call them sharks. One is a legit shark in Adam from the Draft Sharks, and Glenn Lowy. I mean, what league has he not won? Hall of Famer, you name it. Guys, welcome back to the district.
Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, how are you?
Yes, stoked you guys can join us. This is our fourth high stakes roundtable. Really excited. You guys have both been on, by yourself, and now we have a chance to kind of, bounce around and get both of your ideas. This is a big week. You have, depending on what format you play in, this can be a playoff week for some. Some leagues we're trying to square it up and get into the playoffs. We've got a really terrible situation in Week 14 upcoming. We have 6 teams on bye Mageddon. This is the second time this season that we've had a 6-teamer. How are you guys preparing for this sort of bye weeks?
Well,
you go ahead.
It's not only the fact that we have 6 teams that are off week 14. It's week 14. You know, we had that back in week 9 as well, which was tough to navigate, of course. But week 14 makes it even more difficult for multiple reasons. The most important reason, obviously, is the time of the season in our fantasy seasons. You know, for the FFPC, you're already in the league playoffs, so you're going for your league championship. And you might be down, you know, a Justin Fields or a Christian Watson or whoever you may have on one of those teams that have helped support you these last few weeks. And if you're in the NFFC or the FFWC, you're in the last week of your season and trying to claw your way into the playoffs, or trying to claw your way to that top spot for cash before the overalls. So, you know, it's really tough. And what makes it even tougher is that, you know, oftentimes when you have a tough bye week for a team you have to make tough decisions. You gotta decide, because you can't go with an empty spot. You can't take that 0. You sometimes have to drop players you don't want to drop. But what do you have? You have the opportunity the next week, if you have enough money and you make the right bid, potentially to get that player back. This time of the year, and especially week 14, anybody you drop, you're not getting back. There's no more free agency after week 14. So it makes it very, very difficult to navigate. But unfortunately, that's the position we're in with the late buys this year.
Like Glenn, is it a Deion Jackson or a backup running back like that? That's a guy you're going to struggle to hold on to, or are you trying to break ties depending on your roster construction?
Well, I think the one benefit you do have is that those stash type players that you stash at the beginning of the year and you're willing to keep on your roster, you know, in a spot for 3, 4, 5 weeks for that opportunity that he may have. You know, a Rashad White, for instance, even though he was usable, you know, he's obviously a little bit more valuable now than he was 4 or 5 weeks ago. And, you know, that's one of the reasons you put players like that in your bench. You know, obviously he's a little bit different because he was usable all season. But, you know, those players pop. And sometimes you stash players for that pop. When you get to this part of the year, those stashes aren't as important. You may luck out and somebody in that 3-week run breaks out for you. But at this point, you know, you don't have as much time to wait on a guy. So sometimes you just drop that extra guy for a guy that'll give you points this week.
How about you, Adam? Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, listen, COVID prepared us for weeks like this, right? I mean, we've been through way worse when it comes to fantasy football.
Thank you, COVID.
Yeah, that's right. And having to get through, like, you know, setting our lineups 3 times between Saturday night and Sunday morning because guys were getting on planes and testing. It was insane. So we're prepared for this. Also, you know, the good news is the teams that are on bye aren't juggernauts, right? I mean, we've got the Falcons, the Saints, Washington, Indy, Chicago, the Packers. Like, we're not talking about like our premier. I mean, obviously JT is going to stink. Fields, you know, having him healthy and not having him is going to sink. Kamara, but like other than that, at least there's not a lot of studs there. And I think
the offenses as a whole, you know,
right, exactly. You know, if it was like a, you know, Cincinnati or Buffalo or, you know, Kansas City, something like that, I think that'd be worse. And I want to just what Glenn said is absolutely right. You know, you have to decide, like, hey, am I going to keep like a Deion Jackson or something like that? And I think it really depends on your roster build, and you have to decide, like, hey, am I going to carry 2 defenses or 2 kickers, or am I going to carry like a Deion Jackson, something like that? And I think it really depends. Like, if you're 3 running backs deep, like if you've got a Josh Jacobs team that has a Saquon and a Chubb or something, like, well, I might not need Deion Jackson. Maybe I'll carry those 2 defenses or those two kickers. I always carry 2 kickers anyways, because if there's an injury to one, I know Abib's the only guy that can get away with winning these tournaments without a kicker.
The guy runs pure.
I'd like to add something to what Adam just said about COVID, and it's a very, very good point, because COVID has also made these last weeks and the preparation for the league playoffs and the overalls a little bit easier to navigate in multiple ways. Number one is, and this is all season long, a lot of these high-stake leagues have now pushed back their second waiver wire. They all used to be on Fridays, right? And, we had to make decisions sometimes without full information, with partial information. Now, you have Saturday night for the NFFC. You have Sunday morning for the FFPC and the FFWC. So you have a lot more time to make the right decision with the most information. Sometimes the wrong decision with the most information, but at least you have all the information available to you. The least opportunity for surprises. It's the fairest way. But the second thing that COVID has given us. And it goes to a point Adam made, the kickers, the defenses. Defenses maybe not as much, but kickers. In the FFPC, you still have to almost always, if you're going to be in the playoffs or the overalls, you have to take a second kicker. You almost have to, because you'd hate to be in that position. I mean, you could run naked, but you'd hate to be in that position where the guy trips, he pulls a hammy in practice. All of a sudden, boom, you're without a kicker for a week. Your chance of the overall is done. It's a horrible situation. But in the NFFC and the FFWC, and I would like to see this in the FFPC as well, they've moved to team kicker. And again, that's a product of COVID and adjusting for COVID. But I think it's something that benefits the players. It takes luck a little bit out of the situation. It makes kicker, which is a very, there's always that debate, should kickers even be in fantasy, especially high stakes fantasy? It takes a little bit of the luck out of it. And I think that's important for all of us and, a benefit to what happened with COVID and the change in the way we deal with kickers and defenses.
Dan, what is worse for fantasy football? Last year's COVID outbreak or Nathaniel Hackett?
Yes.
Hackett, though, only for people who own Broncos. So not everybody is affected equally. One thing I like about all these Week 14 buys is it makes kind of an interesting twist in the playoffs, because you're going to have a lot of teams who maybe kind of got into the playoffs because they had all these players who haven't been on bye yet, and now they got to deal with it. So if you're one of those teams that you got in and you really got no buys on Week 13 or Week 14 left to go, that makes your shot for the title in the FFPC that much easier. In the NFFC, it just means that you can finish off strong where maybe some of these other teams can't. So, but like Glenn said, I think that the toughest thing is just that you have a hard time, deciding on which players you need to drop if you in fact have to make some pickups just to make it through that Week 14. The good thing is your roster is still going to be 20 players after that, so you can decide who you want to drop, and whoever you picked up obviously has to have some kind of value, otherwise you wouldn't be picking them up. So that's where I'm at on that.
I think that. For me, I think that we had no teams on bye last week, and we only have 2 this week. So you've had time to kind of prepare for this. I think that there's we talk about guys like fringe guys like Deion Jackson you're going to have to make a decision for. But the fact that there's only 2 teams this week and none last week, I think was kind of the silver lining. We've had time to prepare for Week 14. If you're a high-volume drafter, you knew that Week 14 was coming with all these teams since the summer. So, hopefully we're going to at least be 1 week ahead. JD in the pre-show talked a little bit about Josh Jacobs. Last season we had Cooper Kupp, who really impacted leagues as like a end of the third, fourth round type selection. This year we're seeing Josh Jacobs making a massive impact in terms of teams that are making the playoffs. Darren Armani, our guest tomorrow night, Fantasy Mojo, tweeted out about how impactful he was to win rates. What can we learn from a back like Josh Jacobs, who not only was a mid-round pick? I mean, Glenn, we saw NFFC drafts where he fell into the 7th round, the 8th round. The
Late
eighth round.
eighth round.
Yeah, the 8th round for Josh Jacobs. I don't think I saw 9th round Josh Jacobs, but I saw 8th round a few times. But I'll say 7th round was a safe time. You knew you're going to get him. What can we learn from this process? Is there a lesson here for a back like this to fall to the tail end of the dead zone? And I'll even back it up. This summer, we knew that the competition was Zamir White and Amir Abdullah. He still fell to this range. Glenn, why don't you start out with this one?
Well, I think honestly, it was a faulty process by all of us. Okay, I look back at my very first draft. It was a Football Guys, my first draft of the year, and I drafted Josh Jacobs in the 5th round. And I remember thinking back then that was a good value for a full-time back. And the narrative on him really started to solidify in those early months of drafting. He was looked at as, I think a big factor was when they didn't pick up his option. And, everybody and McDaniel going to there and everything. And, his, the New England, consistent plan of the last decade of multiple backs and using and the drafting of Zamir White. There was a lot of reasons why people talked themselves out of Jacobs, but I don't think we did a good job on that. And I'll tell you why. When I picked Jacobs in that first draft, I looked at him as, first of all, his history with the Raiders was as oftentimes a 3-down back and growing into that role. He was definitely the goal line back. He was definitely the early down back. But last year he had the most catches of his career. He had 50 some odd catches. And for some reason he got put into that early down role. I think maybe partially, you brought up Abdullah and you brought up Zamir White, but at the time, those early months, Drake was still there as well. Yes. And I think people just looked at the McDaniel and coming from the Patriots and Jacobs and them not picking up his option and bypassed his history and looked instead at the type of back they wanted him to be. He wasn't an exciting back. He wasn't, somebody that got the blood pumping. He wasn't ETN, somebody new and exciting with that crazy skill set. He was more of a thumper. And people put him into that box, and we all bought into that, including me, who initially liked him. And then I'm passing on him in the 7th round. I look back on that and I kick myself, because if I just stayed with that initial mindset, instead of, we talk about, sheep think, group think, right? There was a group think with Jacobs and a lot of players like him. And I think we all made a mistake. And the second part of it that was also a mistake is, even if the process was right and you drop him down a bit, you out of the 4th round and into the 5th and, down to, there comes a point where you gotta say, hey, he's still the main guy. He's still got value. Let me grab him here. Why am I grabbing this other upside guy? If he just does what he did last year, the upside from the 6th round is huge. Now, if he builds on that, his upside is tremendous. And we got too focused on his downside and didn't look at anything else. And people were struggling to pick him in the 7th and 8th round. And now we could all kick ourselves for it.
Adam?
Yeah, he went from just to add to what, just 33 receptions in 2020 all the way up to 54. I mean, you see that big hike, and we're still sitting there going, not seeing the progression with the guy. And like you said, Glenn, with that 3-down back, Dan, we say it often on this show, we don't know shit, right? And that's one of those where just taking that approach would give you some Jacob shares. And again, just zigging when everyone else is zagging. 2 simple, basic things that we can apply here and would have given you some of these Jacob shares. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think I don't want to rehash a lot of what Glenn said. Glenn's right about a lot of that stuff. I think a lot of it too is how you were building your rosters over the summer. I think if you went running back heavy early, I don't think you were looking at a guy like Josh Jacobs, who was maybe considered a dead zone RB to be added to your roster when you were looking at maybe some of these higher upside receivers. I mean, he hadn't really given us any. I mean, even in his healthy games, so he missed 3 games last year. Even in his 14 healthy games, he was 14th among RBs and PPR points per game. So fine, that's fine. But no, it wasn't like he was a top 5 back in points per game, and like we should. So I think a lot of that had to do with no one saw this type of kind of efficiency coming. And I think too, it's all about the timing of this game. If this game was week 4, I don't think we would all be kind of going crazy over the fact that, oh my gosh, how did we make such a horrible mistake? I think, again, it had to do a lot with your roster construction. This is all being said. Like my best main event team that I have left has Josh Jacobs on it, but it's a Josh Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, Justin Jefferson, heavy receiver team. And so you're able to really capitalize when you can get those late running backs and those early elite receivers. So I think a lot of the high volume drafters, at least the ones that were doing 0 RB, hero RB, those are the teams that are able to kind of capitalize on the Josh Jacobs because of kind of the roster build, just to kind of piggyback along with everything else that you said.
But he also gave us top 3 production guys from week 5 to week 7. Was it week 4 to week 7, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like this is the only.
Sure.
No, without a doubt. I mean, he's been there all year. I'm interested to hear what Dan has to say, but I'll also bring up that people freaked out because he was used in that first preseason game, and they rested the other starters and they played Josh Jacobs, and I think that kind of like broke the levee where people were like, oh, it's avoid Josh Jacobs time. But I think that was one of the biggest lessons learned for me is preseason usage for running backs. I think there's certain coaches in the league who want to see guys get reps. Mike Tomlin used Najee Harris, despite him being a little banged up, a little more in the preseason than some other coaches. So I think the narrative that we want to see everyone rested for preseason games, I think that's coach specific. And I think we also learn a lesson with Glenn hit the nail on the head. And I think like we were correct where we liked Breece Hall as a draft pick. That's not something you can check your process and say, we should have seen an injury. Like in the Go District, we were bullish on Breece Hall. We were bullish on Travis Etienne. And I think we were correct on those things. But at the same time, Nick Chubb, Miles Sanders, and Josh Jacobs get pushed down despite being the obvious picks from their backfield for whatever reasons. And I think that all 3 of those guys are going to finish somewhere in like the top 14 running backs. And I think when we go back in the summer, we need to kind of really take a look and see what the market is doing.
Answer 1912's question, Theo, and maybe go around the clock, do a quick rapid fire on it.
I am not taking him in the first round, but I think that depending on
first or second,
I think the second round based on, I mean, he's 24 years old. He's one of the youngest RB1s right now. I it's too early to say, but I think the second round, more likely than not, he'd be a guy that I'm probably going to fade. If his ADP goes up from the 6th round to the 1st round, I'm out on pretty much any player. We saw that, with a couple guys this year. But Dan, where are you at?
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, first off, we talk about steady drum beats of news or whatever coming out of camps. When you see a guy not get his 5th round or 5th year option picked up, and then they go out and they draft another running back, and then he's starting in the Hall of Fame game, and none of the other starters are starting. That was the point where the fantasy community just started doing the old SpongeBob and Patrick, throw up your arms and run around like crazy. We thought that's it for Jacobs. And I was definitely one of those where I was following that drumbeat, and I was like, I wanted to take Jacobs, and I did take Jacobs like Glenn did, early in the season. And I see that, and I'm like, yeah, I think I got to come off him a little bit. And, so I just didn't get him on a lot of my most important teams, which, that's on me. But as far as 1912's question goes, I think there's a really good chance that he's going to get franchise tags by the Raiders. At this point, I don't know why they wouldn't. It's going to cost them less than $10 million. So, that's not too bad for a running back. I don't think they've really necessarily seen anything in Zamir White that says they think he's fantastic or anything, or otherwise we'd have probably seen him starting to work his way in a little bit more than he has.
We also saw two big hits from veteran wide receivers. Amari Cooper is wide receiver 8 overall, and Tyler Lockett is wide receiver 13 overall. Amari settled in, in the NFFC, Glenn, somewhere in the 6th, 7th round when we're in Vegas. Tyler Lockett went a little closer to like round 9 or 10. Compare that to a number of the ADP misses. Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney, that were younger players. We can throw 2021 Brandon Cooks into this list. Do fantasy players need to do a better job of identifying veteran wide receivers with previous fantasy success that are potentially high target guys that are discounted by being in a bad offense that people are kind of staying away from? Maybe start with Adam on this one.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily, like all those kind of caveats you just named, I don't think those are necessarily things that we're targeting. I mean, I know recently there's been some success for veteran receivers going to new teams. You got your Stephon Diggses, you got your DeAndre Hopkins, you got your Tyreek Hills. But like for years and years and years, it was very difficult for receivers to go from team to team and produce in their first year, let alone going to a team that was going to have, a quarterback situation that was going to be a problem for, the first, what's it been, 11, 12 weeks of the season, and a team that doesn't really like to throw the ball, really just wants to run the ball. So, I mean, I don't think it was a situation like this is something that we're going to be targeting. And not only that, but, he was going in the rounds. Like you said, you brought up some players, but I know, Theo, you're a big proponent of drafting rookie receivers. Like, this is where you start to really look at a lot of those rookie receivers too in this range. So it's hard to like, all right, I gotta get the veterans that are switching teams. I gotta get the rookie receivers that are coming into the league. It's hard to kind of attack all of those different styles of receiver. And I think eventually it just has to come out like, do I trust? And Amari Cooper, he's had a great career statistically, but he's always kind of had like that underachiever kind of thing over his head, even though he had
it, right? Sour, yep.
Yeah. So I think that was it on that situation. And so, I mean, I don't have a ton of him either. And I think it sounds like a lot of you guys don't either, but it's not really something, receivers changing teams, going to run first offenses with quarterbacks that generally aren't very good. Obviously Deshaun Watson's there now, but it's not something I'll be attacking in the future, but maybe just like, and even you can look at guys like A-Rob as an example, a veteran that was really good, switched teams. I know he had a bad year last year, goes to an elite quarterback and what we thought was going to be an elite offense, and he's crashed and burned too. So I don't feel like that's a situation I'm going to be attacking generally, but good for Amari Cooper.
Glenn.
Well, Amari Cooper was somebody that I was on early, like Jacobs, but unlike Jacobs, who I kind of got into the negative hype as the draft season went along. I stayed on Cooper throughout the draft season. I was on him. I thought he was being discounted a little too much. Part of the reason I was on him is, anybody who paid attention to any of my drafts noticed I probably noticed I drafted a hell of a lot of Deshaun Watson in the 18th, 17th, round back then, especially when I waited on quarterback. I drafted a guy like, Derek Carr or somebody pretty cheaply, and then pair him up with Deshaun Watson. At the time, we didn't know when he was going to come back. It was going to come back, 7th week, 8th week at some point. But I stayed on Watson, and I kind of like reversed, paired him up with Cooper. So I would grab Cooper, who was going late, and then pair him up with Watson, and hopefully have teams that survived the season and made it to this very important part of the season, and they would become a dynamic a dynamic duo here in the league playoffs and the overalls. But even beyond that, I did like Cooper. I didn't really understand why everybody was fading him so much. He had always been targeted. He's one of the best route runners in the league, and he was going to a team true that focuses on the run and had an awful quarterback for the first. I think Jacoby Brissett is awful, but that's just he's having one of his better seasons, but I'm not a fan at all.
Top 10 offense, guys. Top 10 offense.
Yes, I got the fact that people were afraid of that offense and what Cooper would be on that offense, but he was going to be the number one receiver no matter what in that offense. You know, Landry was gone, OBJ was gone, Hooper was gone, Njoku, who knew what he was going to be, TPJ, who knew what he was going to be. If they were going to throw, Amari Cooper was going to be the first look on almost every single pass, right? They're not going to run every play. And a number one receiver has value no matter what team he's on. And he's had success with iffy quarterbacks before. I don't know what you think about Derek Carr, but he had great seasons with Carr. So, you know, I just saw him as somebody, especially where he was going as the draft season went along, 6th, 7th, 8th round, as somebody who was very valuable as a number 3 or 4 receiver, which you could get him if you went receiver heavy in the first, 7 rounds. You could easily make him a 3 or 4. And what's wrong with a floor guy like that who also has some upside once Deshaun Watson came back? And that's the way I looked at it, and I liked him. As far as the young guys, listen, we all love those teams. We all love putting together that team with all the young, explosive, high upside players. When you're done with that draft and you manage to get those guys on your team, that's a team that looks like, if everything goes right, you have a team that can compete for everything, right? We all love putting together that team. But, everything's got to go right. And sometimes getting those floor guys, those guys that, on a bad week still get you 8 to 12 points, those guys have value too. And you don't have to have every single player on your team be an explosive guy. I know a lot of people subscribe to that. And, some of the best players in the world, every pick's got to have major upside. And for the most part, I agree. But I think there are some players, because of where they're going and because of the team you're constructing, that floor guy will have value because you still have to make it to the playoffs, right? And you still need to get your foundation point. So, a guy like Cooper, a guy like Lockett, while they're not exciting, while they're not going to, when you draft them and look at your team afterwards, you're going to be, jumping up and down. When the season's going, oftentimes those are the kind of players that help make your team what it is and be successful week to week.
Dan, your thoughts on that? And maybe, Dan, you could also talk a little bit. Do you think that the market was chasing unknown upside a little bit too much this year? I know I was guilty of it based on how the Jamar Chases and the Deebo Samuels did in 2021 drafts.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a little bit of that. Rookie wide receivers are no longer, just an automatic fade anymore. NFL teams are getting them on the field and, getting them targets right away in the rookie season. So it's bad for business to just completely fade those rookie receivers. For me, Cooper was a fade for 2 reasons. One, I just didn't like Jacoby Brissett. The Cleveland offense I felt was very run heavy. And, Amari Cooper, not just last year, but throughout his career, has a history of putting up a lot of, 6 to 10 point games and then throwing up a 30 or 40 burger, which is great when you get that 30 or 40. But, if you don't have that coming on at least a semi-regular basis or even, a 15 to 20 point week, it gets really tough to keep him in your starting lineup, even though sooner or later that thing's going to happen. It just gets really hard to, keep putting 6 to 9 points in your lineup if you think you might have a better option. So that was why I kind of stayed away from Cooper. With Lockett, again, it was kind of the quarterback situation. I certainly didn't trust Any of the quarterbacks that they had at Seattle, I thought it was going to be kind of they were going to be shooting for the number 1 overall pick. And, I did like Tyler Lockett enough that I was taking him some at where he was going, but I certainly wasn't going to push him up at all. But I think the main problem we have is every year there's about 36, 38 wide receivers that are all, they're going to be a wide receiver 2 or better, and the math just doesn't work. There's only 24 wide receiver 2 or better, so there's going to be a bunch of wide receivers that we all think have a great chance to be a wide receiver 2 or better that are going to end up being busts. So, I think it's just a little bit, maybe too much confidence in what we know going in.
Yeah, the Tyler Lockett one was interesting for me. I drafted more of him than Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, I took in the last NFFC draft of the year, and I was like not happy with it. It was like one of those runs. I grabbed my Amari, and he ended up being a big player for me this season. But Tyler Lockett, I drafted quite a few times. For me, it was, we've seen such production out of the guy for multiple seasons, and for him to fall into a wide receiver 4 range, it just, even if the QB play was bad, it made no sense. And I think you see, kind of overcorrections for some of these guys. The Tyler Lockett one definitely didn't make sense.
Theo, you could even add Christian Kirk, I think, to that. And, we talk about Cooper.
Kirk a little younger, though, because somebody corrected me on this one on Twitter.
I know, but I'm just, if you go back to what Glenn was talking about, Cooper was one of the first guys that was signed. So maybe sometimes just following the money is you talk about Cooper going to Cleveland. Like Glenn said, he's at least giving you a floor. He's at least getting a big target share there because they just paid the man. Kirk was another guy. People weren't that excited about going to Jacksonville. Oh, they paid him too much money. What is he right now? Top 24, at least.
Yeah, he's gonna finish like top.
So 15. I get the age is different there, and like I said, just to add, Seattle and Cleveland, 2 top 10 offenses right now. When you look points per game produced, that we didn't expect, guys. Let's face it.
And let's say
we've not seen Geno Smith coming, guys.
Geno Smith, baby, my new savior. I love it.
One more thing about something that's being said about these players. Yeah, everybody was worried about Geno, of course, or Drew Lock. At the time, it was still unknown which direction they were going to go in. And, of course, Jacoby Brissett, I'm still worried about him. But some of the players that you mentioned that were going around the same range that had more upside that people were excited about, and Elijah Moore. I'm a Jet fan, so it pains me to say this, but Zach Wilson was a scary quarterback as well. But that didn't scare anybody off from Elijah Moore. Kadarius Toney, again, being from New York. Daniel Jones, I get to see him quite a bit. Not the most confidence that he's going to be a superstar quarterback, whether now or in the preseason, yet people were grabbing Toney, even when he was hurt, right, for that upside. I think sometimes we do get infatuated with those flashes, those flashes that come that everybody thinks is going to become a regular thing. And for some players, they do, but not all of them. And, one big difference about now than when I started in high stakes fantasy football is, the social media is such a greater factor for fantasy football and fantasy sports than it ever was. So when someone has that splash play, that young guy out of nowhere, it is everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. And everybody starts to salivate and want that player because they think it's going to be everywhere. Well, a guy like Cooper, who's not as flashy, who just goes out and does his job, or a guy like Lockett, who's not as flashy, goes out and does his job, Jacobs and so on. Those guys, they're not going to make Twitter highlight films, every day. And, they're going to be, that guy that doesn't get that blood pumping, like I said earlier. And it's easy to fade those guys. It's easy to pass on those guys when you see that one player, Toney, who had 2 amazing games last year, but did he play at all the rest? But everybody wanted him because of that upside and that hype that social media really brings to the table nowadays.
Those Tony training camp videos did get my blood boiling. I mean, those things
not?
were incredible. Some of those catches we saw at training camp. But one guy who's not a disappointment this year, who's absolutely smashing, and we'll give this one to Adam because he's been a big proponent of drafting him over the years. Travis Kelce is on another planet. He is outscoring tight end 5 and tight end 6 combined right now. He leads the league in touchdown receptions. He would be a top 3 running back. He would be a top 3 wide receiver. How much of a cheat code has he been, even with his high ADP? And Adam, where do you think he ends up next season in terms of redraft ADP?
Yeah, he's been not have to talk about how great he's been. We all know how great he's been. He's single-handedly carrying my 5K team in the FFPC. So I absolutely love what he's done this year. To me, it's a portfolio thing for Kelce. So I tend to really target. You obviously don't want to be too overweight on any player because if you get an injury, you're screwed, stuff like that. So I tend to lean elite tight end in tight end premium styles with the FFPC, and then kind of fade the elite tight ends in the FFWC and Kentucky and the NFFC, just from my personal portfolio perspective. But in the FFPC next year, he's going to go again in the first round. And I just don't know. 34 next year, I think.
34 next year.
34. Yeah. And I think it's just going to be a situation where it's just going to be a portfolio thing for me. I'll do enough drafts where I can kind of get as much or as little of him as I want. And it's, to me, it's all about injury. It's not even about like drop off in like talent at 34. Because even like you said, you just threw the numbers up there, even a massive drop off. And he's still, that was the whole thing about Cooper Kupp going into the year. Like if he doesn't get hurt, even with a massive drop off, like a regression to the mean, he's still going to be.
He just turned 33, by the way. He just turned 33.
So he'll just turn 34 middle of next year. So, and tight ends do last longer. I mean, look at Gates, look at Tony Gonzalez. You got all those situations. So, I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. I'm sure I'll have plenty of them, but it's a situation where I don't see his stats regressing so much from him just getting old and slow because he has that elite quarterback. He is the main guy there. It's just, can he stay healthy? And the guy's always healthy. So, he never misses games, never misses plays. So I think he's a guy at that position when you're healthy, you can last long. And so he's a guy that I'll probably be targeting if I want that elite tight end in the first round.
Glenn and Dan?
I could kick myself again. Because, like Josh Jacobs, again, I wasn't hyped over Josh Jacobs. I just thought he was a value very early in the process. But Kelce, I was all over heading into the drafts. I thought he was amazing. I thought the Tyreek Hill move made Kelce ridiculously valuable. Mahomes is going to get him the ball. He was going to be targeted like a number one wide receiver at the tight end position. I was all over him. And in that very first draft I brought up earlier, I drafted him third in the football guys, tight end premium, drafted him third. And, I drafted him a few times early, but then, again, you get into these drafts and you start thinking things through. And another guy I was into early, so it's not all good players, another guy I was into early, very into, bought the hype completely, was Kyle Pitts, and he was going later. So here I was, I shifted. I'm like, this guy can do what Kelce does, and I can get him and tie him into an elite running back or an elite wide receiver one, and still get Kelce production, which I thought at the time Pitts could do. And obviously a lot of people did. By the time we got the Vegas drafts, Pitts was going in some drafts before Kelce. And his hype had gone over the moon. And obviously it didn't pan out for myself or anybody else. But Kelce, love him. And like Adam said, tight ends last. You worry about age for any player, any athlete, but tight ends do seem to last a little longer. The way he plays, he's so savvy. He's not just physical talent, which he has tremendous ability, but he's so savvy out there in his route running when he has the ball yards after catch. Is there ever a time he's crossing the middle and catches the ball anywhere in the red zone, 20-yard line, where it doesn't seem that somehow he gets into the end zone? And it's amazing how good he is out in the field. So I think he's still going to be very valuable next year. I think he's still a guaranteed first rounder in tight end premium, and probably a solid second rounder in other formats.
Theo, let me jump in real quick because we're 45 deep. I know we got about 30 left. Sorry, Theo. Okay. Go ahead.
I said one follow-up for Dan and Glenn, our NFFC people. It seemed like Kelsey and NFFC was going somewhere between that, somewhere around like 20, right around 24, I think would usually be the cutoff for him. So a lot of times with the third round reversal would play in, where it was like an opportunity cost, where do I take Kelsey and maybe I miss out on like a Mike Evans, a wide receiver who, we saw like an end of a tier. Do you think that was kind of poor process to try to chase those back end wide receiver ones when we had a potential big time tight end one there? Maybe Dan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, for me, Kelsey was, I should have drafted more of him, but it was basically due to, I didn't think he would be this much better than the field. The extent that he's been better than everyone else is just ridiculous this year. And that's partially on some of the other options like, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, getting hurt, missing time, Kittle kind of, being more of a blocker, I thought there were going to be chances to make that up a little bit more in the draft than what there were. So, yeah, I think it's, for me, when I was on that turn, I wasn't taking Kittle because of exactly that reason. I was like, I want to come out of here with 2 wide receivers and a running back, or maybe 2 running backs and a wide receiver, depending on, who was there. But I just wasn't really that focused on tight end at that point. So that was a mistake for me. Glenn?
Format definitely matters. Wide receivers go quick in the NFFC. They go even quicker in the FFWC. Whether it's the right process or not, it's just fact. People want to get those 3 wide receiver positions filled. They want a wide receiver in their flex, and they're going to do anything they can to do it. And they don't want to. Most players in the high stakes level, there are players who do the 0 running back, but most players don't. And most players like to have at least one go-to running back and those 4 wide receivers. So if you're going running back in an early round and then trying to bang 4 wide receivers, it's tough to fit a tight end in there. But it would have worked out amazingly because, again, the difference, like you say, between him and any other tight end is a wide receiver. So you're getting a wide receiver and their tight end. And, if you can hit on a late wide receiver like Garrett Wilson or Christian Watson today or somebody like that to tie into a Kelsey type, hey, you're looking good going into the big money weeks.
We hit on Josh Jacobs. We hit on Travis Kelce. Stay in the AFC West. We've seen disastrous.
Hold up, Theo. Let's give our partners a quick plug, brother. Let me just jump in here real quick.
Got it.
All right. I know Theo's anxious, man.
No,
he's anxious.
Got to pay the bills here, JD.
Yeah, we are friends over at FFPC. And guys, let's face it, not everybody is winning every league right now. So if you can, finish the season off with a little 10K bink on the FFPC, I mean, that makes the whole season all better, right? So right now, the weekly challenge, guys, is still going on. We're only in week 13, $35 entry, $200 entry, myffpc.com. Win up to 10 Genos right now. There's a link below. Click on it. You sign up. You'll get a bonus from the G District. Theo, I know you're anxious, brother. Get back to it. I know. I know, man. You're fresh off that U.S. win. You're just, the blood is just.
Listen, I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight, JD. Adam and I are gonna get in the DMs and just talk to the national team until one of us starts crying
Post
tears
show
of joy.
on the soccer game. Nice.
So something that's a little less joyous than the U.S. men's national team moving on in the World Cup is the disastrous results we've seen from the Denver Broncos. This is a team that was hyped in the preseason. It was a popular team to stack, not only in best ball, but also in redraft. Dan and I did that once with a Football Guys team that would have turned out a lot better if we would have just gone with literally any other quarterback wide receiver combination than our Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Russell Wilson stack. Is there any lesson that we can learn here? I will bring up that Dan, who always has really sharp takes, during the summer brought up Nathaniel Hackett's pace of play. And that was kind of a red flag. And he brought up it could have been on Aaron Rodgers, it could have been on Hackett. But Dan was one of the only people in all of fantasy football I heard that kind of talked about it a little bit this summer. Were there any other red flags that we should have seen coming? And is there any lessons to be learned in this disastrous Denver offense? Start with Adam.
Yeah, I know it's just tough sometimes to think like how, whenever we're draft planning or even projecting for a player is, what are the possible outcomes? And I think, it was tough to see this situation and going in the beginning of the year, I wanted to blame it all on Hackett. But since then, I think I've just seen a lot of footage come out from really smart people on, showing clips of actual plays where Russell Wilson can't run basic reads in basic offensive schemes, right? I mean, I've seen clips that they've broken down where, it's the most basic routes against cover 3. The defense is showing cover 3. They run this route to beat cover 3, and Russ looks and just doesn't throw it and bails, and he's out of there. So I don't want to blame it all on Nathaniel Hackett. I'm not a Nathaniel Hackett guy. I'm a Syracuse fan, unfortunately, being from upstate New York. He was in Syracuse, Doug Marrone, Jacksonville, Green Bay. Like, he just has never been anything special at all. I thought it was a terrible hire to begin with. So I don't want to blame it all on Nathaniel Hackett. I think it's more on Russell Wilson going forward there. But I don't think it was super hard to see this coming for this offense with the amount of talent that they've had. Now, they lost Javonte early. They've had Jerry Jeudy in and out of the lineup. So they've had the weapons be in and out, but again, they're just not scoring any points. And they just look embarrassing, right? You can just count it every third down. If I was the type of guy that was live betting plays during games, every third down, he's going to snap the ball, look up, look down, and get sacked. Like, that's just what Russell Wilson's going to do on third down. So I don't necessarily know from a dynasty perspective where to go from here with them, because I thought I saw some stats today that the cap hit next year for him is like $100 million. You can't, they can't get rid of him. They can't get off of him for the next couple of years, but you got some really good young weapons there. Like, what do you do? And you can't sell them. I mean, I play dynasty. I'm not as big into dynasties. I know you guys are, but like, what do you think you can get for a Jeudy or a Sutton who's tied to this Broncos offense for the next 2 years? You got to hope for Hackett to get fired, which you probably will.
You're not selling now. You're waiting for the news in the offseason or a change to happen.
Yeah,
but guys, all I got to say, Adam, do you remember 2011, the Philadelphia Eagles? You guys remember that dream team coming into from the offseason? I mentioned it. I mentioned it on this show a few times, Dan. I don't know if you remember in the offseason, as much as I did draft a lot of stacks with Denver, that just kept resonating in the back of my head, man. That dream team, when there's so much hype behind something, again, zigging when other people are zagging.
Yeah, I didn't mind having, a share of Sutton or a share of Jeudy or whatever. I kind of shied a little bit away more from Russell Wilson. As Theo mentioned, we did have that one team where we stacked it all together, but I didn't have any problem with that. I mean, it was just one team, so
it was, and this was a Football Guys team. This was not a main event.
Right, exactly. So I mean, sometimes you got to go into it with the idea of, hey, I might be wrong. Pace was definitely a concern for me, but sometimes things just don't work out like I think they're going to. So I'm always trying to grab at least a little bit of even players I'm totally fading if they're cheap enough, which all those guys were. So You know, I don't know. I mean, I think we all kind of wanted to believe that Russell Wilson was a lot better than what he's looking like he is. You know, we wanted to believe that Pete Carroll was a problem, and it looks like maybe Russell Wilson was a problem.
That is
Glenn,
true,
anything to
Dan.
add
That's
on the
true.
train wreck.
What a disaster. I mean, seriously. And it was a disaster from the first game. I remember watching that game in Vegas against Seattle, and how many opportunities they had in the red zone that they could not convert. And you said to yourself, okay, Russell Wilson, new team, Nathaniel Hackett, new coach, they'll get it together. They never did. And I think those two guys, you know, that's the problem. You know, Javonte Williams, of course, getting injured, that hurts. Sutton and Judy got hurt for a while there, and Sutton hasn't been the difference maker. A lot of us, including myself, might have thought he would be on this newer iteration of the Broncos. But I think it comes down to Hackett and Wilson. Listen, great teams have great leaders. They take on the personality of their coach or their quarterback, the most important people on the team leadership wise. And Hackett looks scared all the time to me. He's a terrible decision maker. That plays, and let's face it, I didn't know this before the season, but I'm convinced now that Russell Wilson is weird. You know, he's just a strange guy.
That's right.
He's just a strange guy. And, you know, maybe that team in Seattle growing up together with Pete Carroll also, you know, who kind of settles things down kind of coach, you know, that played all right and was hidden. And you know, Russell Wilson's talents were able to be to come through more. But now with Hackett unable to shield him, and Wilson, you know, just being a strange guy, I think the whole team kind of feels off balance, feels off, and it's just not playing well. And you know, I think it's more than just the players. I think it's the leadership there, and I think that obviously doomed this year, but they're going to have to make changes to improve next year. I think Hackett should go. I agree. There's not much they can do with Wilson, but they need a strong coach there to rein things in and get them moving in the right direction again.
It's an interesting deep dive for JD and Dan, especially for like us this summer, is these new coaches and diving into the offenses, because, you know, betting on Mike McDaniel, you know, really paid off. He's a new coach. Brian Dable was able to get more out of Daniel Jones and get Saquon Barkley back on track. But it's really hard to predict. There's always like one dud in these new head coaching jobs. And it was like the team that was most heavily drafted had the most disastrous results. So it's like a perfect storm of crushing fantasy players and just being kind of shocking. Kind of a quicker question here. Glenn mentioned Javonte Williams. We'll start with Breece Hall. Glenn and I both live on Long Island. You know, we watch a lot of the Jets games. It was just really horribly sad, not only for my Breece Hall shares, but for Jets fans in general when Breece Hall went down with an injury. He was on track to be a locked-in, you know, top 6 running back. Displayed fantastic talent catching the ball and running the ball. Javonte Williams also displayed some talent in a kind of a bad situation, but I think we could all agree that he's a capable running back. How likely are you guys to draft a running back like this coming off of an injury next season? Do you view injuries as a discount or something where you want to stay away from entirely? So you diving in or you staying away, Adam?
Yeah, usually I'm the guy that dives in on the discount, who just kind of disregards, it's just coach speak, or it's just the media or whatever talking about players return. Oh, they want to be safe, they want to return slowly. But this J.K. Dobbins situation really is one of those that kind of turned me on to the fact that maybe it's really truly is a player by player. I think I've just been so spoiled. Maybe some of us have with the, Adrian Peterson coming back off an ACL in like 4 months and being like the MVP. And it's just like, man, like if he can do it, why can't, everybody do it? And then, Godwin gets hurt. Godwin doesn't go on the pup or anything. He plays, but he doesn't score for 10 weeks. He hasn't looked great kind of up until now. So I think I'm a little bit more cautious with these players coming off ACLs. And I think I'm a little bit more in tune, or I'm going to be more in tune to really the coach speak and kind of how they're going to bring them along. I know that the Dobbins one was interesting because Dobbins like, hey, I'm ready week 1. And the coach is like, no, he's not playing. Like, we don't want to play him. And then he comes back and he's re-injured. And here we are again. So I think to me, it's a player-by-player basis. Kind of keep your ear to the ground and see what the player's saying, see what kind of the medical experts are saying around it. Because I am the type of guy that initially goes in and buys that dip. But I also don't want to be stuck again with and again, Dobbins is a different scenario because, there was quite, well, he's not even going to be, is he that valuable even if he does play? He's not going to get the catches and, the offense isn't that explosive. He's sharing with Gus Edwards, all that other stuff. But aside from that, like I love Breece Hall, man. I had him everywhere and it was just so devastating to a lot of the shares to see him go down. But, if he's going to be on the pup, I mean, when do you take a guy like that if he doesn't play the first 6 weeks?
Glenn, in or out?
You know what? I'm very similar to Adam. I was that guy that always looked at the name and the history and he was going to come back as good as he was. And if he does, what does that mean for my team getting him 3 rounds later than I would have, or 4 rounds later, or wherever he goes? But, I think, like Adam, I'm a little bit more cautious now than I have been in previous years. You get burned a few times, and when you're playing high stakes fantasy, it costs money. And but Breece Hall is more than just a physical back, and you have to look at what type of back they are also. Breece Hall's got amazing vision. He's got great hands. He's more than just his injured body part. And if that body part comes back, even not full strength, his other skills can carry him to still elite production. Who are we getting? Are we getting ETN, who came off an injury last year, got off to a slow start, but then became everybody he became the player we all hoped he would be, right? Before getting hurt again last week and killing me, by the way. And, or are we getting kicked?
Don't even get me started on that, Glenn. We're gonna.
He really cost me last week, but I won't say.
It was just ridiculous.
Yeah, painful.
Dan, you have a philosophy on injured running backs.
I mean, for the most part, I'm going to, I'm not going to take him where most people are taking him. And part of it is, like Adrian Peterson, yeah, he came back, but I mean, that guy's a freak, and we've known that for years. I mean, there are very few physical specimens like Adrian Peterson. There are very few people who work as hard at their craft as Adrian Peterson did. And part of it too is just kind of like the degrees of, like there's ACLs and then there's ACLs. Like Saquon's 2 years ago was a really bad ACL. He tore other ligaments. I mean, it was an extensive knee injury. Last year, you couldn't have paid me to draft Saquon. This year, I was all over him. And that worked out pretty good. I think Javonte is going to be kind of that guy for me because he had the same sort of knee injury. It's it's more than one ligament. I don't want to get involved in Javonte next year. I don't think. But Breece Hall, I think, was much more of a simple ACL, depending on where he goes in the draft. Now, if he's going the first round, I'm probably out. If he's going like late second or early third or something like that, like then yeah, I could definitely get in there. Even if he goes like mid second or something, I'll probably just get a share or two. But if he's going in the first, I don't see it. I think you've got to have a way to get around him starting slow, and that's tough to do when you've got a first round pick on him.
Yeah, I don't think he'll hit the first round, but I think again that mid second round is a reasonable where it's discounted enough, and it's I think I'm going to be taking some stabs at Breece Hall. I believe he's a next level type athlete. I think he's a unicorn, and I think Glenn makes a good point that he's such a capable pass catcher that him being run into the ground doesn't scare me as much. So I'm definitely going to be betting on Breece Hall. JD, are you going to be back in on those guys next year?
I got 2 words for you guys. Dalvin Cook, 2017 ACL. That's all I got to say.
That's a good call. Definitely a good one. Real quick around the horn, how did you guys handle your Cooper Kupp shares? Are you holding him or did you cut him? Adam. I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I held him, but I don't think right now, so far, in FFC yet to be determined, but my FFPC, I don't have any that went to the playoffs that had Cooper Kupp, weirdly enough. So I don't need to worry about that. But I would say, I don't know. I was a little bit more bullish, but the way the Rams offense looks right now, they might just shut him down. So I might be tempted to cut him a little bit more than I would have been last week.
Glenn or Adam?
Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, bro.
Muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I lean towards cut. I've got one. I actually got 1 or 2 Cooper Kupp teams that got in, which sucks. But yeah, I'm leaning towards cut again, depending on with the Week 14 bye, stuff like that. It seems like they're shutting everybody down. Aaron Donald now has an ankle, and just so I just think they're just going to shut the whole team down. There's no reason to bring him back with a week left or something like that. So yeah, I lean towards cut.
Yeah, pretty much the same. If I have an easy spot, and Kupp's there, and there's nobody else to pick up that I really want or need, I might keep him there just in case. But he's an easy drop. When we hit what did you call it? Bymageddon?
Bymageddon.
Part 2.
Trademarked by Theo. Bymageddon.
And you're looking
John
for those
Daigle's using it. It's catching on.
It's definitely a winner. It should be patented. But
it's under the GOAT District patent, don't worry.
When you're looking for that player to drop that we discussed earlier, he's an easy one because the chances of him coming back are slim. Even if he comes back, what's he going to give you? So, it's painful to cut the name, but the actual production you're going to get out of him, it's not that hard to give up.
Theo, just to add on this, just a question that wasn't on the show sheet that I'm just curious to ask all 4 of you guys. Now we kind of get where we're starting to see where teams are NFL-wise, going into the playoffs, making the run of the playoffs, dead, looking at next year, throwing in the towel. How does that affect how you play guys in your start sits? Do you look at that? Do you look like, hey, Carolina's probably not making an effort. I'm, hesitant to throw in DJ Moore. Does that play a factor for you guys? I don't know who wants to start on that one, but I think that might be relevant to this time of year.
Well, I'll comment on DJ Moore. One recent change that's going to work out for him is Sam Bradford because not Bradford, Darnold.
Darnold.
He loves DJ Moore. Last year, when he was quarterback and he threw to DJ Moore, might have been a 99% target share. It seemed like he only had eyes for him, and he showed that again this week. So it's a combination of factors. You bring up Carolina. Sam Darnold's trying to prove himself, and there are players on that team that are going to try to prove themselves, including the coach. So, I can see them, and they've been kind of a tough out in some weeks. They've had some tough games against some tough competition. They're not a great team by any stretch, but as long as a team is putting in a weekly effort, I think you can still bank on them. A team like the Rams, who we spoke about earlier, who show you that, last year was the year, we're mailing it in now, we'll try to reboot for next year. I mean, that's a team that is kind of a little bit more dangerous to bank on at all. So I guess it depends. It doesn't necessarily matter on the win-loss, but it matters on the culture of the team and how they're looking at these next few weeks.
Yeah, I love that you guys brought up Carolina. He's actually a guy I had down. DJ Moore was a guy I had down as my guy for the 3-week sprint. They've got the number one receiver schedule down the stretch. Pittsburgh, Detroit, Tampa, all good weather games. And he's been great, like you said, Glenn. He's been great with everybody but Baker Mayfield over his career. So as long as Baker's not playing, DJ Moore's a guy. I know he didn't go in like wide receiver 3 range. He's more of a high end wide receiver 2 where he's being drafted. But he might not make a lot of these playoff rosters. So if you got DJ Moore, I think you're in really, really great shape down the stretch.
Well, let's stick with that question because we're getting deep into the show. Last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devin Singletary, Rashad Penny were kind of the heroes that came out of nowhere, where if we would have talked about them in week 12, week 13 and said these are the league winners, you probably would have laughed in my face. Adam, you bring up DJ Moore. Do you have anybody else that kind of stands out to you that could be an impactful potential league winner among these kind of under the radar guys?
Yeah, it's hard because I hear under the radar and I think like guys that were drafted later, but some of these guys are under the radar because they just haven't really performed and maybe they'll show up down the stretch. A guy I really, really wanted to be in on here late was Isaiah Pacheco, but they just signed Melvin Gordon, which is
Pacheco is one of my names.
Yeah, same.
So annoying. I mean, he got 22 carries last week, 3rd best schedule down the stretch. Houston, Seattle, Denver. Denver's not great, obviously, but Houston, Seattle's awesome. So I really want to see what's going to happen there. It feels like every year they've always got like this under the radar, no name back. Damian Williams, comes to mind, a guy that pops for them kind of at the end of the year. So I really want Pacheco to be kind of that guy for them. Heck, it might be Melvin Gordon for all we know. And another guy, just real quick, that's not an under the radar guy, but like Alvin Kamara. He gets Tampa and then he has a bye. So if you can somehow get through, or if you already have a team that is through with Alvin Kamara, his running back schedule on the stretch, which I don't have in front of me here.
Is the States one of these teams, Adam, that are just like done? Like they're like, what effort are we really going to see?
Yeah, maybe. I hope not, because their schedule for the running backs and receivers, their running back schedule is top 3 and their receiver schedule is top 8 down the stretch, and they got some good, Olave. So I really hope maybe they throw Jameis Winston in there and kind of reboot for the stretch run, which would be freaking awesome. So Alvin Kamara is a guy where, man, if you can make it through, if you got an automatic bid with him, he's not going to be probably on many teams, and I think he's going to be another guy that's going to be there for the 3-week race.
Glenn.
Well, like Adam, I'm looking at players that didn't necessarily get their teams to the race.
Yeah.
But now are starting to get a little bit more usage, and you see kind of like a transition. One guy like that he's not definitely going to be a league winner, but he certainly now has the opportunity to show himself and potentially be there. Is Rachaad White. You look at Fournette. Everybody knows what Fournette is, and Tampa Bay might be transitioning right now to White, and who knows where that goes. Right now Fournette will probably have an equal share, but if Rachaad White ends up becoming the guy there, he has the skill set to be an explosive fantasy point scorer. Another guy like that is a guy we've all been on for years, but his opportunity seems to be taking a firmer hold. Similar situation, older back in front of him, but now the transition starting to take place. Tony Pollard, he's dynamic, he's amazing. He can put up 30-point weeks. The only thing standing in his way is Zeke, but Zeke is starting to get a little dusty, like Fournette. Maybe he's a guy that maybe this is his time and he can become a league winner. Pacheco was a guy also that I was thinking about, but again, I don't think Melvin Gordon's going to be. I think he's a depth play.
Me too.
The first time he fumbles on that team, he's going to hit the bench. There's no question in my mind.
He might not get the opportunity to fumble. I mean,
he might not.
I think depth piece is the nail on the
Pacheco
head.
looks like a special guy. So I'd be surprised if they pull it from him coming off that week. I think he runs
kind of like a psychopath at times. Like,
he's fast. He's quick as can be. He fits that team. He really does. on the wide receiver end, there's a few guys I think that might be coming into their own that can become league winners. Christian Watson, he doesn't get a lot of targets, but the efficiency is off the charts. It seems like if he touches the ball, it's a touchdown, 70-yard touchdown. Even with Jordan Love last week, right? He's so fast. He's so athletic. He's that kind of player that one play can give you 15 points like that. And I think he, is somebody that can be a difference maker in that run. Another guy, a guy close to my heart, maybe now with Mike White, who knows, Garrett Wilson, he's a special player. He's a special talent. Take it from a Jet fan. He's going to be very,
that
very
was my guy, Glenn, for this.
Oh, I got a lot of names are getting crossed off right now, Theo.
I love that guy. And I have him on a lot of teams. I grab him a lot in that, 10th, 9th, 11th round area. I believe he can really be that guy because he's becoming the wide receiver one there. And now the passing game, if Mike White is real, which, remains to be seen, that passing game might become more efficient. And Carter and Hall being out, you got to rely on the passing game a little more. I think he can be. Those are just a couple of guys I was thinking.
What about you, Dan? Anybody we didn't touch on?
Yeah, I'll throw out a couple names. I think, you want to look for guys like Gabe Davis who can just have a monster stretch, at any one time where they could have a 3-week barn burner. Some guys like, Hollywood Brown. A lot of his teams might have gotten knocked out just because he wasn't around for so long. Now he's come back, and, so if you can make it through that week 13 and use him, weeks 14 through 17, that might be worth a lot. I think you guys have said most of pretty much everybody else that I was looking at.
I got a couple more.
I think those would be the ones for me.
Pacheco and Wilson were excellent calls. I like your Hollywood Brown call. I'll throw out one tight end. Dan, kind of your argument where a guy that's been missing, but if you make the 3-week stretch, Dallas Goedert is still a top 5 tight end despite missing games. I think Dallas Goedert could have a big say if he comes back.
When is he back, Theo? When is he back? Do you know?
He's on IR, so he can come back. He's going to miss 10, 11.
15 can come back.
Week 15.
Week 15,
like
yeah.
15.
So I think, he could make an impact. I'll throw out Jalen Warren. I think with the Najee Harris injury, we'll finally get some starts from Jalen Warren. He's on a number of teams that are not Najee Harris teams. If you look throughout your league, it's not always like a handcuff. And then to piggyback on the Garrett Wilson call, Treylon Burks, if you get into the sprint with Treylon Burks, he looks like an easy 15 plus point per game kind of guy moving forward.
I'll throw in my boy George Pickens. We just saw him against my Colts. I mean, he's just getting targeted all over the place. He's, as much as the Pittsburgh offense isn't that awesome, their schedule is pretty good, and Pickens can give you some nice points down the stretch, even in Superflex. I mean, go get yourself some what's his name? Kenny Pickett could also with his schedule. And then our boy Glenn talks about Cleveland, Deshaun Watson coming back. You got Amari Cooper, and then we got 1912 calling out DPJ. Not a bad little sleeper on an offense that we might see throwing the ball a bit more.
Yeah, no, I think those were some very good names. We had a bunch more questions, but
yeah, we got a heart out. We could go on a long time. Do we get a few more minutes, you think, Theo, or what do you? We squeeze another one in?
We'll throw one more question out.
Throw one in with the out. Let people walk their way out with the answer.
We're going to go around the horn, and we've tried to do it where I list like my number 5, then Dan lists his number 5, then Glenn would list. We're going to give our top 5 draft picks. We're going to go non-tight end premium. Let's go NFFC, FFWC, KFFC, or your Yahoo PPR league, however you want to cut it. Your top 5 draft picks for 2023. We'll start out with Glenn Lowy.
I think next year is going to be, a wide receiver heavy year. I think people are going to look at this year and push up the wide receivers. So, if that happens, I think it's got to be JJ, right?
Yeah, 100%. You got a rest of the top 5, Glenn?
In no particular order.
Sure.
I think wide receivers are going to make the bulk of it, and I think Tyreek's going to be there. I think if he comes back and explodes, which he's certainly capable of, Jamar Chase could be a factor, and if he continues to grow over the next few weeks, CeeDee Lamb. If I'm going to throw a running back in there, it's got to be Eckler, I guess, unless one of those guys I mentioned earlier take over the job, like a Pollard. If he takes over the job and just explodes the rest of the year, you never know where he could go, a guy like that.
Dan?
Yeah, no surprise. JJ number 1 for me. Like Glenn, the rest of them you can kind of throw in any order right now, but I'd put in Tyreek, Stephon Diggs, Austin Eckler most likely, and Devontae Adams most likely, and maybe a Jamar Chase. So that's 6. I cheated.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go Justin Jefferson, clear cut number 1, Tyreek Hill number 2, Stephon Diggs number 3, Jamar Chase number 4, and then I like your guys' Eckler call, but I think that at the end of the day, Christian McCaffrey with an entire offseason, he's at 19 points per game. Eckler's at 23, so they're kind of close. I think CMC will be the first running back taken off the board at 5th overall. JD?
Going 5th after you 4 studs, I figured everything would be crossed off, even Theo. I was going to throw that in at the end, but, you killed it. So I'll go with my boy 1912 helping me out. Before you mentioned non-tight end Prima, I had Kelsey even at in the top 3, but I think he could still be. We showed the numbers and how much of an advantage it gives you at the tight end position. Even in a PPR, guys, I think he can be up there for sure. Top 10. I don't know if he gets into the top 5, but he's another name you'd consider. I like the CMC Theo. That's exactly who I'd throw in. Guys, tonight was awesome. Glenn, Adam, you guys always bring the goatness.
Adam, anything to add with the top 5?
Oh, sorry, brother.
No problem. And
they usually come to me last, so I apologize.
No, it's cool. So I had Jefferson, Tyreek. I actually have Kupp. I still think he's going to be. He's not old yet, and him and Stafford got there. I mean, it's not an AC. It's a high ankle sprain. It's not an ACL or anything. So Jefferson, Tyreek, Kupp, and I really like Saquon. There's some landing spots where he could be. And I mean, the Giants' offense stinks. He is the entire offense. If he goes somewhere where he can be even better, I like his chance of being drafted in the top 5. And then a guy that probably won't make the top 5, but could, depending on where he lands too, could be a factor in the first round. Bijan Robinson. I feel like if there's some spots, Baltimore, Chicago, Atlanta, Miami, if he lands in the right spot, fresh young legs, elite player. I like him too.
Guys, this has been a blast. Stick with us. We got some more roundtables coming. Theo's putting together some serious high-stakes roundtables for you guys. And Glenn, I mean, remind the peep your handle. Good luck rest of the season. I know you got some big teams going into the money weeks, as we like to call them. So we wish you the best of luck. We appreciate you tonight. And yeah, man, just let the people know where they can follow and get all the little tips.
I'm sorry about that. At Gleneration _X, Gleneration X, and thank you.
Write
guys.
it down.
I always enjoy chatting with you guys.
Awesome to have you, Glenn. Adam over there at Draft Sharks. I'm sure you guys are already following both of you guys. Just remind them your handle and what you have coming out over there in the next little bit.
Yeah, you can also find me at Deep End FF1 for the High Stakes podcast. Mike Shope and I do, just grinding out these last couple weeks, giving some waiver advice, all the same stuff you guys are doing. I love coming on the show. I love having you guys on our show, and just grinding these waivers and hopefully bringing home a chip.
Bringing home a chip. Dan, we used to do give a quick tip on the way out. So I'll let you remind the peeps where they can find the overhyped sleeper and give your little wise tip of the day here to the fantasy community.
You're catching me out on the tip of the day. I probably don't have one of those right on the tip of my tongue, but yeah, at Overhyped Sleeper, drop the final E from Sleeper. I am on Twitter for all your bad soccer takes and occasionally a few good football takes. You never know.
Theo, I was just trying to set you up for the tweet you put out.
Now, like I
the etiquette.
support the Baylor Bears any chance I get. You know, now it's kind of like, you know, if Dan can't be for the U.S. men's national team.
No, I'm all for the USA. I'm just it's soccer is such a hard watch.
Okay, you know, to each
Theo,
his own. But
Theo, I want you to spread the word on your tweet earlier today on setting lineups. I just feel like that's got to be shared.
If you're especially whether you're in a home league or you're in a high stakes league, set your lineup this week, even if you've been eliminated.
Yes, please.
You're going to cost somebody money. And at the end of the day, some of the longest memories you're going to find are high-stakes fantasy football players. If you burn somebody by not setting your lineup, it's going to come back around on you. It always does. I will forget some parents' names of, like, my kids' friends. I forget phone numbers. But I will not forget who Glenn Lowy took in the 7th round last year in the draft I drafted next to him. Fantasy football players remember everything. So if you don't set your lineup, it's going to come back on you when you have a good team.
That guys, always set your best lineup, man. Come on, if you're a real player, it's in your blood, like it's in you. You just can't walk away from that screen without setting your optimal lineup. The chat has been lit tonight, so appreciate all of you guys for tuning in, for joining us live. If you're listening to this right now in podcast format, make sure you tune in live, man, on YouTube. We'll always take questions. We'll try to throw as many as we can to our guests. We bring you the best guests, help you guys win it. Guys, we approach the money weeks right now. Make sure you tune in on every show to get yourself to the trophy, to the money. Smash a subscribe. Smash it all, guys. Smash your leagues. And we'll check you all later.
Go district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
A lot of fun. That was good, and we still didn't even get to like all the questions. That was very good.
Yeah, without a doubt.
That was good. I was trying not to. It's one of these things where once you get into the conversation, there's so many ways you can go. You know what I mean? But I knew Glenn had a hard out. So.
Like, some of those things, like when you start diving into, like we could do 90 minutes on the Josh Jacobs. You know, like
totally.
The whole, it's wild. This season's been insane. But it's really, really just kind of good kick in the tires. And I love trying to figure out this year's league winners. I think it's great that we're kind of all in succinct on Pacheco because I think he looks really, really good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's just had terrible touchdown luck.
Yeah,
for the most part, they just haven't. If they start using him around the goal line like they were using Edwards-Helaire, and he has just decent touchdown luck, I think he could be. Edwards-Helaire was getting you 15 to 20 every week. I think Pacheco could at least do the same thing. And if all of a sudden you're throwing that guy into your flex instead of somebody else, it's going to be worthwhile.
Oh, he's setting up as a league winner for sure. And like you said, man, he just looks like a psycho out there, which in that offense is not a bad thing.
He's like a lunatic when he runs. It's like he wants to, I guess, you're a 7th round pick.
Yes, that's exactly
I think that plays into it, but I think that's just kind of like the way he runs is so violent. It's
the
like
difference between him
there.
and CEH, Theo. Just say it. It's the difference between him and CEH, who got drafted, way earlier.
100%. But Pacheco is, man, he's just he's a tough dude, and he runs hard and he runs angry, and it's just like a breath of fresh air kind of guy you want to root for. So I hope he does it. I wish I had a lot more Pacheco. I do have Pacheco in our Triflex league, Dan.
Oh yeah, yep, yeah, and he's just kind of a ready, fire, aim type of player. He's going hard somewhere. He doesn't even necessarily know exactly where, but wherever he goes, he's going to get there quick.
Not a lot of nuance. Not at all.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm also I think our super bracket's going to be super fun, Theo, because if we can
that
make
team,
it,
I was looking at that today. That looks really good.
Yeah, if we can make it past this week and then get into all those teams, there's a fair number of teams that have a lot of week 14 buys. So this might be the tough week, and then you make it through the first 2 weeks, and then you're into more money than what we already won.
Love it.
Is that Millie Billy main out now totally, or what?
Yeah, it's out.
Totally out.
Yeah, we needed one more win.
Really, we can have like a retrospective on that team.
That was so close.
Should have done better.
Who's got the best chance right now at either a main or a football guys?
I have a couple of very good football guys. I have a main with Bip that if we get by this week, I think we're looking good. We finished 4th, but we've got a very dangerous team. It's a Saquon, Ken Walker team, and our wide receivers are pretty good. Andrew and I got by. We had like a sweat last night to get by Abib for the 4th spot in this one. So I have a couple of main event teams that are still kicking the tires. So we'll see. It's this.
We're still winning that pros versus Joes thing, eh?
Yeah, we're still in first place.
You're dead meat, still in first place.
Yeah, Theo, you and I have a main that's rounding into shape pretty well.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. We definitely
still in.
We got Josh Allen, Jonathan Taylor, Ken Walker, Waddle and Tyreek both, Metcalf, Burks.
The Waddle and Tyreek both that's the one, Dan. When we win $1 million, it's those guys are going to combine for like 75 points in week 17.
That's exactly it. And then we have Ayuk and Pickens still sitting on the bench, and Latavius Murray sitting on the bench.
Oh, those are good bench pieces,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, basically, tight end is where we're weak. We've got Dulcich and Conklin, and that's it. So,
yeah, it's tough.
We're hurting a little bit there.
Yeah, Conklin's been a letdown, man. The last
time.
Little bit.
Yeah,
big time.
But maybe we'll just have to pick up,
Delaney Wood.
So Jelani Woods is interesting because Granson was out, but if Granson's back, they were in like that weird split. It could be like
there's 3 of them, right? There's Mo Ali, there's Woods, and there's
Jordan Akins. Is he still available in that league?
I'm sure that he is.
It's so gross to even talk about, but
it really is.
It's such a bad week for adding tight ends.
Every week's a bad week for adding tight ends. 3
of the last 6 games.
Oh, 19-12. I forgot I didn't realize we're still on. I didn't even end this. 19-12 telling you to pick up Bellinger. There you go.
Yep. That's another thought too. Yeah, I've got him down. So yeah, we'll have to take a look. We've got a few possibilities at tight end. I'm sure we'll add one somewhere.
We'll just pray on tight end. It's got just Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and we'll leave the tight end position blank in tight end premium. It's the big flex.
That's why you trade for Kelsey, baby.
That'll be our answer to Abib. He wins without the kicker. We'll just win without the tight end.
Someone responded to Jeff Manns in some Jeff Manns tweet where he's criticizing Tua, and he's like, Theo, you got to tell Jeff Manns. And I'm like, I don't want to get in a fight with Jeff Manns. Like, what's the point of this? It's like, no, I don't want to beef with Jeff Manns.
That'll be on the next Goat District pay-per-view, guys. So make sure you look out for that one.
Yeah, like